listener production.
Hey, Bension Siebert here with The Briefing. Everyone has feelings about McDonald's. The American fast food giant evokes nostalgia for Happy Meals and Macca's runs, anger over the obesity epidemic, and a sense of utter permanence. Nothing, it seems, can change the fact that McDonald's is pretty much everywhere and it's for pretty much everybody. Or maybe until now. McDonald's is experiencing its first downturn in sales in years, and another US burger chain, Carl's Jr., which had ambitions to open hundreds of outlets across Australia, collapsed into voluntary administration just last week. So what does this say about us? Are we finally abandoning greasy burgers? What does it say about the cost of living crisis? And should this rare downturn for a mega company like McDonald's make us worried about the immediate future of the global economy? Mitchell Taylor is a partner at global strategy consultancy firm Simon-Kucher and an expert in corporate strategy. Mitchell, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing. Give us the background. What has been the story of big fast food chains like McDonald's since COVID, and what's going wrong with them now?
It's a great question because, like many industries since 2020, or let's say 2019, pre-COVID, it's gone through some real roller coaster highs and lows in the last 5 years. So as we started COVID, I would say in 2020, no one was really sure what would happen. Yes, we saw a spike in delivery demand. You were all sitting at home, ordering things off Uber Eats, Deliveroo at the time, maybe even DoorDash if you're one of those people. And that was kind of okay. We got through that. But then where it really started to explode, and this is not unique to Australia, but much stronger in Australia because we're also familiar with drive-through here. And it's us in the US that kind of lead the world in drive-through. And because we're allowed to drive through COVID lockdowns, fast food restaurants had a huge increase in demand, specifically through drive-through. That boosted the category overall. So fast food demand increased regardless of the brand. So you couldn't really do anything wrong as a brand at the time. As long as you could service demand, as in more customers coming through and wanting more food, you were doing well. What that also led to was customers being a little more free with pricing. So at the time, interest rates were low, inflation was under control. It was all very well fine. Prices were creeping up and no one really noticed because things were kind of moving as they normally were. And we actually had a little bit more money to play with back then than we were used to. So we're happy to spend it a little bit more on fast food. What then happened in 2023, and you would have heard this all across the world, is cost inflation. So it's not just inflation for us as consumers, but it's also inflation for companies. So all of their raw materials, i.e. chicken, meat, burgers, soda, whatever it might be, that all increased in cost. What some fast food restaurants did at the time was say, okay, well, let's keep profit and we'll just increase price. This is a tactic McDonald's went for globally, famously globally, that we've all seen in the news in the last 2 weeks. Most other fast foods also followed suit. So they increased their prices beyond a rate where the local customer was happy to pay. This has continued since 2023 because it's a little bit of sometimes we speak of it like a drug you can't get off. Because it's so effective at driving profit. Once you do that, you're kind of stuck to it because there's no other mechanic you can use to achieve the same kind of incremental dollar return as increasing price. This has really become unstuck for McDonald's in the last, not even in the last month. I would say this has been creeping up for the last 12 months. We've seen almost 100% cost increase from some of these brands in the US on some of their key menu items over the last few years. So you're effectively paying double today what you used to pay for, say, a Big Mac meal in the US.
So McDonald's has increased its prices, as have some other fast food chains that are generally known for being cheap food. What has that done in relation to fast food that's more like a Guzmani Gomez or a Subway, for example? How has that been different?
You kind of just nailed it with the question. So what you said was cheap fast food. And I think as consumers, it's often talked about that as consumers are stupid. They're a little bit They don't think rationally when they're making purchase decisions. But what consumers are really good at is subconsciously, you will have set a quality and budget in your mind when you're looking for food. So say you leave the office and you go out looking for lunch, you've kind of already decided subconsciously that you'll spend a maximum of, say, $10 on fast food. You'll be willing to spend up to $15 at a cafe to get a more quality meal in your perception. And this is where the lines have been crossed between what is called fast casual, as in Guzman and Gomez, Mad Max, etc., and what's typically called fast food, which is your cheaper fast food, your Hungry Jacks, your McDonalds, etc. The price gap is now so close that that subconscious limit has been passed for customers, and they say, well, I can pay an extra $1 or maybe not even pay extra at all, and I can get Guzman and Gomez for lunch. And I perceive that to be better for me because they talk about fresh, they talk about made to order. I can see it happening in front of me. All the ingredients look a lot better than the mystery of what's happening in the back of the kitchen at a fast food restaurant. And therefore, I'm willing to pay a little bit more for that meal.
McDonald's and others have tried really hard in some respects to undermine this narrative that they're just junk food. My question for you is, does anyone actually buy a salad at McDonald's?
Have you ever bought a salad at McDonald's?
No.
No. So there are different ways to improve the health image. At least if you range a salad on the menu, you can give the impression that you have a healthy option. So you're giving choice to customers, and it might help your impression of the brand that it can be healthy, but when you actually go to make your lunch purchase, you just go for the burger and chips because it's effectively what you like. So the sales aren't great for those healthy items, but it can improve brand perception, absolutely.
Another big US fast food chain, Carl's Jr., it had ambitions to open 300 stores in Australia, but over the past week, we've seen it collapse into voluntary administration. Do you think that this says something about the Australian consumer more broadly? Are we falling out of love with greasy burgers?
Australia is a very difficult market to break into for any brand. If any of the listeners out there have tried to buy a house, how expensive land is, and that impacts corporations as well. So when they're looking to open restaurants, the sheer cost of land versus other countries in the world is exorbitant in Australia, and that restricts a lot of companies kind of being successful in their launch plans. We also are seeing shifts in consumer preferences. So this has been happening since the 90s. We all remember the movie Super Size Me in 2000, whatever it was. So it's not a new concept, but I think it's becoming more accessible to people, which is what I spoke about before, that you no longer have to pay more to get what you perceive to be a healthier and better quality meal because of the price journey that a lot of fast food restaurants have gone on in the last 2 years. So it's really kind of broken that barrier. And that would have been something Carl's Jr. would struggle with, because not only would the cost to enter Australia be very high because of that land and labour cost I spoke about, but also shrinking demand in that space from the local consumer doesn't help the business case either.
McDonald's has been such a fact of life for so many decades. It's such an economic juggernaut. It's everywhere. Do you think that the fact that they're having this downturn suggests something worrying about the global economy? Could this be a canary in the coal mine, or is that just sort of fear-mongering?
A short response to that would be, I would say it's fear-mongering. I think throughout years, there are always shifts in different categories, and they tend to stabilize over time. So for global behemoths like Burger King, McDonald's, KFC, this is a storm they can weather. They will get through it. At some point, they will change their strategy. They'll go back to their heartland, and they'll continue to appeal to the bulk of customers who are still buying the product. Like when we're talking about shifts away from these brands, we're talking in single-digit percentages. We're not talking, halving the size of McDonald's overnight.
Could you ever see a future without McDonald's or a giant like that? Are we going to see McDonald's still going when we're all in nursing homes?
It's a tough one. I've recently come back from the US, and if you look at the fast food landscape in the US, it is such a big part of their culture. Like, it is very difficult to find non-fast food options in smaller areas of the US. So I'd say in a country like that, absolutely it's going to retain. There's some smaller markets around the world, like in some European markets and in Asia, where fast food isn't as prevalent. And I'd say these fast food brands do struggle more to grow. In Australia, however, look, we're not as bad as the US in terms of how much fast food we consume, but it is definitely a part of like the average Australian's repertoire in terms of what they eat every month. Fast food is there, and it has always been there. And unless something significant changes from a legislation point of view, I don't see those habits changing in the next few decades.
So a lot more Macca's runs to come. Mitchell, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing.
No worries. Thank you.
Mitchell Taylor there. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. Before you go though, we'd love it if you could share this app with someone you think might enjoy it. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search Listener Newsroom and hit that subscribe button. And we'll be back in your feed at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you then.